Hey, it's Jessie from Squeegee Ink and welcome back to Printer's Corner. This is where I answer all the questions you've given me throughout the last couple of weeks in a little bit more depth. And you can also see the results from this week's community poll, where I asked the community a few little topics and we all see what we think about these kind of questions. In this week's episode, we have questions about cleaning screens a bit aggressively. We also have, how often do you change your squeegees? And we also have, do I need to use a different squeegee if I'm printing on hoodies as opposed to t-shirts? Our first question is from Paolo Ink Sirep, and they said, whenever I was in uni, when I get a new screen, I had to bleach and scrub it and then do that a few times to prep it. Is that wrong? I'm going to say yes. It seems way too aggressive. It seems like a lot of work, and using bleach can just be a bit too aggressive. You might just have a overzealous technician in your print room who swears by using bleach. If using bleach 3 different times was industry standard or useful or correct, then everyone in the industry would be doing it. You don't need it at all. When you get a new screen, you can simply use a specific screen printing degreaser and a very soft brush. You can scrub it, rinse it off, scrub it on the other side. That should be all that you need in order to get the emulsion to adhere the first time. There may be lots of other things on, after the degreasing and the drying, that's stopping the emulsion adhering to the screen. And I don't think it's that you haven't bleached the mesh enough. So just maybe step away from the bleach, get some degreaser, and do what the industry is doing that's a little bit more efficient and kinder on the environment as well. Our second question is from Jonah Helpful One, and they said, #Printers Corner. How often do you change your squeegees? Do you rotate the blade before buying new ones? It's tempting to rotate the blade. I think maybe technically you could. My screen print supplier is Screen Print World in the UK, and they do this really good thing, which I'm not sure if all screen print suppliers do, but they actually cut the blade for you as well. So I buy a whole roll and then I say, look, I want maybe 10 strips of this squeegee durometer, like a red or a yellow or something. So different hardness. And I say that I want them all 12-inch. They chop up the whole roll for me in these 12-inch little bits. I take all the blades out, swap them in for the new blades, and it's very efficient. I think technically you could take the blade out, turn it 180 degrees and put that in and then still use it. But I think just eventually chemicals start to erode the rubber as a whole, and I just don't really see it being very efficient. But I think technically you could, if you're a hobbyist in particular, you can get away with more of those things. And in order to tell when it's time to change your squeegee blade, because I can't say every 6 months or something, because you might print hundreds of shirts in that time, and I might print thousands, and someone else might print tens of thousands. So what I do is I just run my thumb over the blade and see if it's sharp by seeing if I can feel the contours on my thumbprint across the blade. And that tends to be a really good rule of thumb as to when my blade needs swapping out. And then I'll do a whole U-haul, I'll do a huge clean, and I can get right into the crevices of the squeegee handle as well. My final question is from 00001 Kendra. And they said, #Printers Corner. I want to start printing on hoodies. Can I use the same squeegee blade, or do I need to swap the blade? You can use the same blade. I use the same blade. I've done that and I don't think I'm getting away with it. I think I change different parameters and it still works. I'm still depositing the ink onto the surface of the garment and it's all fine. I can kind of see what you mean with, you might want to be using a softer durometer blade, which tends to be like a red blade in most suppliers, to lay down more ink because you think the hoodie is more absorbent and needs a thicker deposit. but I don't tend to actually change that. I tend to just change the off contact, so the distance between the bottom of the screen and the substrate, just to accommodate for that thicker layer of garment. Maybe you'd print slower to deposit more ink as well. There are other variables that you can change before you have to change your squeegee blade, basically. So no, I wouldn't worry about it. I think you've probably got the same amount of kit, the same kit that you need for your t-shirt printing as you can just use for your hoodies for now. To round up this week's main question, which is, does the squeegee durometer even matter? Yes, of course it matters. It's one of the 5 or 6 main variables in screen printing. However, you can stick to a medium durometer blade and get most jobs done with it. I think people are going to be changing their mesh count before they change their squeegee blade. But you're obviously changing all these things all at once. But yes, it does, basically. If you're using a very hard blade, that's if you're really concentrating on halftone, very precise printing, which might not be something that you ever do in your screen printing practice. Or if you're printing on incredibly, I don't know, absorbent things like Hessian sacks, you'll definitely need to go for a softer blade to deposit absolutely tons of ink. But a lot of people are just going to stick around the medium durometer blade section, and you're going to be using that most. There's different parameters. It's quite a difficult question, but yes, it does matter, the durometer blade that you use. The best people to ask for this are going to be, actually, I think it's other printers instead of the screen print supplier in this case. See if someone else is printing the same kind of artwork that you're wanting to do. So say if it's like flat vector artwork, or if they are printing this simulated process stuff, you can ask them, what squeegees are you using? What mesh counts do you tend to use for this type of artwork? And then follow that as a starting point. And then you'll start to adapt your own practice and techniques and variables yourself. Now it's time for this week's community poll.
Community poll.
This week's question is special effects screen printing. And one of the answers was, I can do all the specialty printing. And that was about 20% of people. 6% said, I have done puff printing only. And 76% so far have said, I have never tried specialty inks. That's actually quite shocking to me, because I love a specialty ink, especially in the shop when you're actually being the person who sells the t-shirts to the consumer. It's really, really effective to use a specialty ink. So, for example, in the shop at the moment, I have UV reactive ink, and it has sold the hell out of one of my t-shirts. It's a real wow factor when people see what happens. So just to tell you quickly what it is some mushrooms on a t-shirt, and it says 9 ways to die. It's about lethal mushrooms and how they're going to kill you. But at first you can just see the mushrooms. And then when you bring the t-shirt out into the sunlight, i.e. UV light, it actually shows you this other ink that's printed there, but you can't see in the inside. And it reveals how deadly the mushrooms are, why. And when you show that to actual people in the street, on the customers, they are so wow, that's amazing. I definitely want to buy that. So it's definitely something to have in your arsenal. But I get that consumers coming to you as a screen printer don't know about UV ink, so they'd never ask you for it. So then you can go your whole career without doing it. And then your practice becomes very much like plaster or water-based. And it might become a little bit boring and stagnant. But if you experiment with these really cool inks, you might even be able to offer it to your customers and be like, oh, I'm really good at this puff printing, or which is actually really popular at the moment. Or I could do special effects with foils, or have you seen my UV ink or my heat activated ink or my wet reveal ink? So that's just down to the screen printer not doing testing and experimenting on the side, when I know it's not always commercially viable. But when you can offer this above and beyond the other screen printers who only have Plasol ink that they're offering, you will tap into a new market that are really engaged and might be spending more with your print studio. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Don't forget to leave us more questions with hashtag Printers Corner and make sure to take part in the poll. And I hope no digitizers call you up this week.